Maybe people just don't know. Maybe people just ask the questions. I mean, I formulated almost my entire existence on investigating the truth. When some people want to learn how to work with cars or play video games, it was always, for me, it was learning computers, learning how to investigate the truth. So it's always confusing to me when people don't know the basic history, but I can see why it happens now, whereas before I wasn't. I was aware of shitty history books, but, even with shitty history books, there's always that need in me to investigate. And it never really clicked in why other people are not that way, up until recently. That said, like, joining spaces and hearing people talk, like, for the first time in probably my entire, the last 20 years, I feel like hope for what's to come. Whether if there's chaos, strife, and then the hope that comes after it, just like Weimar Republic and Hitler and the rise of Nazism, there's still that hope. And I think the more that the speed things up, the faster the people wake up. Because the analogy that I like to use, and I've been using this for the last decade, is what you can look over to Europe and you can see what's going on there, and that is what is coming to the States. That's what I've been telling people for the last, more than a decade now. And every day that rings truer and truer.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sage. It's funny, and I'll go back to the start there. I mean, you're right, and I'm interested, and I think I agree, and because that's why I'm in. But I'm glad to hear you say that what's happening in Europe is coming to America. So by that, I take it you mean things are worse in Europe. At one point, fairly recently, things would have been worse from a racial point of view in the USA. But we've we've caught up and overtaken the USA, I believe. But then at the same time, I don't know exactly who knows exactly what's going on at the border areas to the south. But it certainly seems to be as if there is a deluge of people coming over, and they're not, most of them, not Mexicans anyway. They're from China or Pakistan or Africa or wherever. Going back to, I also found it very interesting going back to what you were saying about, I suppose with two main things. One, that you assumed everybody else knew but didn't care. And the other thing, that your way of getting to know things was through Martin Luther. And I suppose that has to have been because he was known to you as a faith leader of a Protestant variation or Protestant church. And then I suppose there's another thing there as well, which I would say is your innate characteristic, which is curiosity. What I unfortunately noticed, or had to come to the conclusion, maybe I'm wrong, but I did come to the conclusion in my adult life that most people aren't curious. Most people do not want to know anything, not because they've decided it's bad for their mental health necessarily, or they've made any decisions. I mean, maybe they subconsciously think that, but most people don't think anything, and they don't want to think anything, and thinking is hard, and they just want sugary drinks, and they want sugary food, and they just want amusements, and they want video games, entertainment, television, movies. Now, of course, right, I'm not saying that I don't or didn't like to watch movies and play video games, but I stopped doing those things probably not long after September 11th, right, in 2001. Because, like, I think you probably, the sober idea, the idea that, I won't say his name, but the idea anyway, that, white men shouldn't sit around in a drunken stupor any more than people in the South during the Civil War would say, let's all just get drunk and have a big party and be, out of our minds and unable to even walk straight until such time as the North land a ship outside of Richmond or something, and then we'll sober up and we'll fight them. So, like, things are too serious to live in a false reality. We need to wake up. Now, of course, I do think it's possible that most people subconsciously know that they don't want to wake up to a reality that's so unpleasant. They'd rather find some false virtual unreality to hide in. And there's a lot of that, but they don't consciously think it. But what I did notice, and I guess I can say this, like for my job for a few years was to teach people how to do their job. And it was like also the main part of it was to take people in who like weren't usually people who had never had a job before. They were oftentimes people who were in their 30s, 40s, 50s even, and they had a career behind them. And my job was supposed to be just explaining to them things that are proprietary or unique to this particular corporation or job that they were doing, but that it would have, as they would say, like a prerequisite that, if anybody bothered hiring these guys, it was because like they were a broad, good fit for the job and were bringing a lot of skills that applied to it. But no, I mean, in the vast majority, I won't say vast, but more than half of the recruits. And look, I had to consider at one stage as well that I was being deliberately sabotaged by hiring managers. They were deliberately sending me and selecting deliberately the worst of the worst. And since, anyway, that for a great many number of years, they've been deliberately hiring people not on merit, but on other attributes that usually mean that they're not going to be as good as they otherwise would have been. So I felt that I was dealing with people who had never wondered about anything. And it's very difficult to get people to engage with any subject matter who aren't curious about anything because they don't want to know anything. So how can you get them to retain any information or grasp it? Or, in the sense that we would say, understand something in a way that isn't just remembering by rote the words that you have just said and then passing an exam by writing down those words you said, They're incapable of actually doing anything or adapting to any situation. Should the procedure you tell them for a certain situation not apply 100% to the environment or the conditions? Anyway, I began to get extremely despondent about the future of humanity if this was representative of them. But looking back through my life and, going back to school and that kind of thing, this is not any kind of self-praise, but I gradually started to wonder whether it might be that, maybe people like you and me and others, we all got here because we had a few character traits that we were born with, which was we were curious. We were perpetually curious about the world. Why is this? Why? And why is that? And why not this, if that? And so on and so on. And identifying contradictions and saying, but if you're telling me this, then how come that? And you probably remember the same as me. Then people would just say, well, nobody knows, or I'm not telling you, or enough questions for now. Or stop being obstreperous. Stop speaking out of turn, maybe,
Egos, to cut in real quick. That's what I always thought it was. I thought people could not have conversation because their egos got in the way of being able to admit that they do not know something. So therefore, if they, for me, it was about the egos, and then they must, if I instill these thoughts and these questions in their head, they must go, just like I would, and go research it themselves. Because it's their egos that are getting in the way. They just don't want to talk something they don't know about. Which, for me, I thought I just understood that. Like, hey, it's all good, I instill the question. They go research it. But you're absolutely correct. I mean, a lot of people just don't even bother to go research the shit because they don't want to know. They want to live their heads in these little sheltered windows of mice running on wheels.
Well, yeah. And, better just say to you that another very obvious thing, which again just comes to you with experience or relaxing a bit and I suppose tamping down the ego, which we all have, like, of course, is just realizing that many things can be, partially true, and there can be an intersection of a lot of things being true. And so what you're saying doesn't contradict what I was saying there at all. And I want to actually sort of echo what you're saying there, because what I discovered was there was a lot of hypocrisy in what people were saying to me, or people who were, bringing me up, educating me, or telling me the things that I needed to do and correcting me if I was doing them wrong. Like, people would say to me things like, you gotta listen to other people and not allow yourself to have any reflex reactions and not allow yourself to lose control of your emotions. It's always very important to be in control of your emotions. If you get angry, then you've lost the argument, all this sort of stuff, right? Meanwhile, these people would fly off the hammer anytime they want, and so that was part of growing up and realizing that I thought that I was being prepared to join a society where adults had learned to control their emotions, have mastery over themselves, and have this kind of mature discourse. But when I got older, I realized, no, that's not the case at all. They just want me to shut up and listen and behave myself and conduct myself in a way that's polite to them. But they don't feel they need to be bound by those rules, you know. Again, it was another reason why I started hating everybody as well, you know. But there wasn't.
I'll say that I was a little bit lucky on that end, because when I joined the military, I became a medic for an infantry unit. And with that, because you're in that position of power where they rely on you, I would have the ability to have those discussions with people after work, during work. And it was more welcome than if I was a hiring manager, as you were speaking about earlier. When you are in those positions, it's easier to talk to people. It's easier for them to listen to you, especially when you come to them with knowledge and use of other things. Then after the Army, I got fucked up, and I pretty much, I escaped for a very long time. Mentally, drugs, mainly medication, I should say, not drugs, but escaping the reality was a big focus, because it was, to me, it was like, well, everybody was already aware of the juice, so why continue to put myself through pain when I could just escape? I ran. I ran. I don't know if you know what Daisy is. It's a video game.
It's called what? Daisy, is it?
Yeah, Daisy. It's it's like a military simulator, but
I don't think so. But I can imagine it. Go on, yeah.
So people get lost in this game. You can have up to 100 people on a server, and you have 25 miles by 25 miles. You have land, freedom, and it's a very realistic game. With that comes escapism, and I'd run servers for that, and while that made me money and it even gave me a community, things I could talk to people, have thoughtful conversations with. I mean, there's some people that they want to escape, but with that, I saw one of my co-owners on the server, he was in it for the money. I didn't know at the time he was 100% and I did not know that at the time he was from Norway. And this guy so we do on Discord, which Discord is a communications platform, and we were on that. We have 6,000-7,000 people on the server. And he was very adamant about speech, no hate speech, no saying bad words. And to me, he's like, who gives a fuck? I'm a fucking army, who gives a fuck what people say? It does not matter to me. But he would get very antsy about these things, very antagonistic about anybody that would go and say mean things. And it's just a means of control, instilling control, because you're bringing those systems of control that control the speech into a video game, and it's like the shit keeps trickling down, instilling that control into people, whether they're teenagers, adults, it doesn't matter. Even in a world that's meant to escape or help escape, there's still that system of control that they're just like trying to trickle their shit into. And the video game industry as a whole has completely went down the fucking drain in the last 10 years easy. Because there's nothing but that. Because they have all the investment that is owned. So my whole point is, even the people that escape, they still have those same systems of control put on them, which again is just shaping the mindsets of people to be, well, I don't want to be racist. But on the flip end, because you've had so many people have the shit shoved down their throat, they're that much more likely to be like, yeah, this is fucking stupid, fuck you, I'm going to be racist. And I've seen that a lot in the community that I was in, especially towards the end. It was a big reason I left, and I'm no longer a co-owner with that dude, because while it made me money and while I had that community, I'm just going to deal with the fucking bullshit. I'm going to be me. I'm going to say what the fuck I want to say. I think everybody should be that way.
Wow. Yeah. Again, a lot of stuff there that I would like to make sure that I don't forget to refer to. One of the things there is that I completely identify and understand what you're talking about when you say you thought that you had found a place of refuge, somewhere to hide in, and yet this thing keeps following you even into virtual reality. By the way, as far as America, if it was ever free, even for a day or a year or whatever, until they basically started the game up again, but it's like a game on a new level or a different tier or on a different board game. I remember, and I think it was in a movie called Bram Stoker's Dracula with oh god, who was the played the characters in it? Renfield, I think, was played by Tom Waits, and forget the guy who played Bram Stoker, but I think it might have been Gary Oldman. And so that version of it, I think there's a scene in that where he says the phrase, "I crossed oceans of time," and one of those is to get to Mina, I think, like his girl or wife from 1,000 years ago. But then you see him, I think, coming to the New World, I think, in this movie, and he's literally crossing the Atlantic, but it's a huge body of water, and he's doing it in basically one or two just swoops, and he's got his bat wings out or whatever they are, and he's basically like, it's also like the music in, I guess I could think in the same way as in The Wizard of Oz, right? I'm coming to get you, right? In all these movies, they are everything in the world. I came to realize, whether it's movies, whether it's just art or music, truth in music as well, and all games. I would include, I'd say there's probably not a video game that doesn't in some way, but all the board games and so many video games as well. There is an art to them. There's something in them that is telling people that we are in a game where, in a way, if we like to think of it, it's this evil that's always chasing for us, won't leave us alone. It's the constant companion that won't go away. And he is wherever we run to, and I see that in Europe as well, wherever people hide, just like white flight in America. But also I see there's a line called the line of St. Michael that goes all the way back to Mount Sinai from Skellig Michael and through a place called, I think, St. Michael in Cornwall in the southwest of England, and then through Mont Saint-Michel in the northwest of France, and on then through that there's a, maybe it's Santo, what is it? What would it be? Santo Michelangelo or something like that. I guess just Michelangelo in Italy. And on. It's a straight line all the way. So to me, that tracks the flight of people from, must have been somewhere there in, Mesopotamia or the Holy Land, to get away from these people. And wherever we go, they keep following us. So you can't even hide in virtual reality. There was a couple of other things. I'll if you want to come in, I'll stop now. But just wanted to say as well that you being a medic, of course, made a huge difference. And unfortunately, that's what makes me hate people even more, that they'll only listen to you when things are serious, but they feel they can disregard whatever you say. It's pearls before swine if it's not in their immediate best interests to listen to you. And unfortunately, what I've discovered is, although I have never charged for anything I do or say, if you do give away what you have for free, people place no value on it, which again speaks to humanity and makes me wonder whether they're worth saving at all. But as I say, I've already covered that. I actually think that, look, they might have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren who won't be like them anyway, because it's in the genes. So I take some sort of optimism in that. I also didn't want to forget to come back to the idea of Protestantism and Martin Luther King. Sorry, Martin Luther. And, the Jews and their lies. And yeah, that was formative for me as well. But I was late to that. And I think probably because I was brought up in the Catholic tradition and therefore would have just been told, Martin Luther's just one of the guys who started Protestantism. So I just thought, oh, all right, okay, fair enough. I don't really need to know any more than that. I had no idea of the history where he was knocking on the doors of the cathedral, right? And banging his objections to the church on that and that sort of thing. So he seemed like a righteous objector to me.